On item 4, please, Councillor Farr, Councillor Green.
Thank you. I think Councillor Johnson as well. Did you indicate?
Councillor.
I just want to thank you, Madam Chair, my committee members, and not just for healthy, lengthy debate last week at Planning Committee, but for what has been over 5 years of your attention to what has been a sticky issue, at times a tumultuous issue, for the most part an amicable series of years of consultation towards a compromise that's before us tonight, particularly as it relates to item B of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee Report 16-010. I have so many people on staff to thank that I'll just respectfully ask Jason Thorne to meet me on the aside after tonight's meeting so I can go over the planners like Robichaud and Anita and even Tim McCabe before Jason, who sat in some of these many meetings over the course of the last 5 years as it relates to these 5 addresses at the Gore. Also under his staff, the urban renewal staff over the years, the legal staff over the years, the building department. Ed Vanderwint has been fine and picked up the ball from the CBO before that sat in the meetings over the years. And certainly around this table over the last 5 years, we've had a number of different debates. We've had moved unanimous resolutions as it relates to this property, but positively and directly affects anyone else as it relates to heritage grants, significantly changing for the better opportunities for people to restore older buildings. I've dialogued with, I think, everybody in the last couple of months that has been associated with the newly formed Friends of the Gore. I said it at Planning Committee. They are well organized, well spoken, and for the most part during and afterwards very fair and very polite in their approach to this issue, but certainly have made a significant impact with some of the facts and some of the concerns and some of the comments that they have made with respect to the way I perceive heritage. I appreciate that. I told them that. I want to say it again here tonight. And for all those folks who were following early on their social media campaign, who came, I think there was 27 or 30 in the audience last Tuesday night, many of them wearing green shirts and buttons that said Save the Gore. And many of them, I think 14 or 15, actually came to the podium one by one and spoke in a very organized, articulate, and polite fashion to the issue. Their issue clearly was save it all. In the last 2 months, that was their prevailing theme, their message. They went to meet with my neighborhood associations. They got, I think, 4 of them to sign up and send letters, which is great. I mean, I've been dialoguing for 5 years on this issue with them as well. We meet regularly, and I give them full kudos for what they've orchestrated in that capacity. However, and when I've responded to I think I've responded to everybody who's cared to include me either on a CC or deal with me directly and appeal to me directly that are on the other side of what's before us tonight. I did want to add today, and in a positive, hopefully light for those folks who may not agree with us here tonight, if indeed we can find some way forward tonight, as we asked for in the spring of 2016. So I'll just read from what I've now added to the correspondence that I shared with those folks who may not be in agreement with us. Since this current Gore issue first appeared on the front pages of the local paper, I can say it's the Spectator, more than 5 years ago, we, as a council, have moved to register nearly 1,000 buildings of historical interest in our downtown. Since this issue came to bear, we, as council, are nearly complete now with that same process of close to 800 properties in the Durand neighborhood. This all relates to heritage and movements towards the preservation of heritage and showing our support for heritage and building on our support for heritage. since this issue became an issue more than 5 years ago. We have also, as a council, worked together, and you supported me in keeping 150 Main, the old federal building over there at Caroline and Main, from the wrecking ball. It's now part of a wonderful adaptive reuse, and it is part of a 5-phase development that is significantly adding to our tax base here in the downtown. We, as a council, moved not 1 but 2 emergency heritage intent to designate motions at council. Both of those emergency intent to designates were unanimously supported, and it's never happened before, to my understanding, in any previous council. So in the last 5 years, that's something as well that we have done. We have facilitated and continue to facilitate the Royal Connaught 5-phase development with terrific work from our staff, and I meet with Rudy, and we have cappuccinos the odd Saturday morning as well, make sure everything's going well. Another very significant 5-phase development at the other end of the downtown that I think is going to be very, very important to all of us, including those who appreciate heritage. We've moved several motions enhancing heritage grants and encouraging preservation. We sold and saved the sandbar. It may seem like a small thing, but we owned it for over 10 years, and it could have gone to the wrecking ball. It could have gone in a different direction. It's now becoming is soon becoming a micro brew and artist studios, and a really underappreciated so far, but we got to have a ribbon cutting on just the significant restoration that's occurred at the sandbar, and we all know the history of the infamous sandbar. The wonderful historical wall of our BIA, known as International Village, well preserved after that council moved to agree to sell, and we're reaping the benefits now. So the other and the final one that I talked to a lot of the folks wearing the green t-shirts about over the years is and I think is very significant, because unlike Lister, the Gore is a privately owned project. It is part of a massive assembled piece of land in the heart of our downtown, and it's the first of a 3-phase development. They always want to talk about the comparison to Lister. Well, currently we still have, and doing the deal on Lister, to my understanding, I wasn't around at the time, we had a lot of skin in the game as a municipality. We have all of our staff there. That was part of the deal, and I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million. And eventually we own that building, and so we really, a former council, not in my time, really did our part there. And there's 2 remaining city-owned properties that have been for 25 years or more a bit of a thorn in our side as a municipality that we gained control of over time. One is Akhmar and the other is St. Mark's. And this term of council, we solved one of those. In the next 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, that will be a completely restored heritage designated facility at the corner of Hunter and Bay, and one that will be, I know, full to the rafters with community use 7 days a week, thanks to motions moved and heritage efforts approved and initiated around this table. So while I might have gone a little long and I'm a little off topic, I think it's very important, especially tonight, if I am finally moving forward on what has been a long-standing issue as a 2-term elected official here in Ward 2. I think it's important as well, though, tonight to remind everyone of our steadfast resolve as it relates to making certain wherever and whenever possible, it's not going to be always, but wherever and whenever possible, we're going to do what we can to make heritage an important issue to all of us, and understand and appreciate and enhance the issue of heritage for the better wherever and whenever possible. So I appreciate the time. I appreciate the support. I appreciate the sidebar conversations over the years, Madam Chair and Maria and others around this table. And I would love to move this item tonight and then the next one. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor, and I'll come back to you. I have Councillor Green, Councillor Johnson, the Mayor, and Councillor Pearson. Councillor Green, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. I won't repeat anything that I said on this particular item at the Planning Committee, but I will say this, that for those that are really keen about heritage, they will know that in Toronto, an article recently ran around the stealth demolitions that are happening there. Proactive move by, I would say, unscrupulous developers to tear down properties in Toronto before they can be properly acted on. And, you know, I say that in reflecting on the fact that what has become known as the Christmas miracle unprecedented. Councillor Farr coming in to save what was savable, I guess, as highly debatable, but to basically give us the next best option. And I say that I won't be supporting this. I'll be opposing this particular one, but I say that with a caveat to say that having the long conversations that I've had with the councillor, I have one of those green shirts. I know the folks that were advocating and organizing. They did a fantastic job. But this was a really complex file. It was definitely not a clear-cut case. There was, long conversations around the layouts and the applicability of the way that those were designed in the time period that they were designed pre-Confederation. I recognize that we're in the 150, but I have to say that from a very pragmatic place, if it wasn't for Councillor Farr, those buildings would have been gone. And we would have had little to no control over what the end result is going to be. And so in speaking with some of the residents and some of my own residents who very passionately advocated, and which is why I'm, one of the reasons why I'm here opposing this today, representing my residents in my ward, I had to tell them the following, that, the best case scenario is that they had stayed and remained in pristine condition, that they were completely occupied over the last couple of decades, particularly when we had some inner city decline, that they stayed in the pristine condition. That wasn't the case. The current property owners, as you know, over the last little while, for whatever reason, they've continued to decay. But Councillor Farr and his leadership on this particular one came up with, what some might consider the next best, and even for those that wouldn't give them that to say it's the next best scenario, it's definitely the next best to the next best scenario. Because the worst case scenario could have been what happened in Toronto and what continues to happen, which is these stealth demolitions where you wake up one morning and everything's rubble. So I just wanted to say that because I know he came under a lot of fire. He could have done the popular thing, maybe pretended to support something that he didn't really support, which certainly wouldn't speak to any type of integrity. But he stood firm. I oppose him on this, but I respect the fact that he took a very complex file and it's coming to its fruition. And if I could just end on this final thought, Madam Deputy Mayor, is that for the heritage folks that are out there, I encourage them. I encourage them on that day and continue to encourage them to stay engaged, to go to the next project, to figure out what is the stock, where do we got to go next. I know the Heritage Committee is doing this work, and to make sure that we're kind of not in the 12th hour, but we're in there and we're doing what we have to do to make sure that we don't have to be in these emergency type crises again. So hopefully we can close the loop on that. And I just wanted to take a moment and give Councillor Farr his credit for unpacking a very complex and controversial, contentious item. Those are my comments, Madam Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Aidan Johnson, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I agree with everything that Councillor Green just said. I'm going to make basically the same argument, but I'm going to flip the order to change the emphasis. So basically, and very correctly, articulately, Councillor Green argued we shouldn't demolish these buildings, but Councillor Farr deserves kudos. And I'm just going to flip that and say, Councillor Farr deserves kudos, but we shouldn't demolish these buildings. So on the first point, everything Matthew said is right. I've been so impressed by the painstaking and stressful work that Councillor Farr has done, reaching out to all constituents on this one to do what's right for the economy and what's right for heritage. So thank you, Councillor Farr, for due diligence. Now the but. These buildings are, to many of us, beautiful. Much more importantly, these buildings are old, and these buildings are legally designated heritage. All of that has to matter. The argument has been made that the 150th birthday year of Canada is the wrong year for the demolition, and there's a lot of power and goodness in that argument. I would only note that Hamilton is much older than 150 years, and every bit of our more than 150-year history, you can date it back to Aboriginal times if you desire, should be preserved, and that includes the Gore. So without belaboring the point any further, I will be voting against demolition. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Mr. Mayor, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone that's engaged in this issue, both for and against. These are always difficult ones, and I would say on a kind of a blanket statement that I believe everyone on this council and our staff care and concern themselves with heritage. If we did not, Akhmar wouldn't be standing anymore, nor would St. Mark's, nor would we have a Lister block that has gone such a long way and over such a long period of time come to be one of the iconic buildings that is leading the transformation actually on James North. So I would say in a blanket statement, we all care about heritage. Now, do we all want it to be perfect? In a perfect world, that would be great. But I have to tell you, and I don't say this for credit because I just want to acknowledge that the councillor has done an enormous amount of work for a long period of time in very difficult circumstances on a complex file, and more to come yet in terms of other development. I have to admit that I encouraged him to, and the developer and the city staff to come together to come up with a workable compromise in the absence of nothing happening at all. So the stalemate wasn't producing anything that was going to be of a lasting and enduring benefit to the city of Hamilton. Something, in my view, had to give so that we can actually get something positive happening there that is a workable compromise. And I think that's the end of the day. Politics is about compromise. And if in a perfect world, we'd want to save all of our buildings, but that isn't always possible. And I think in this particular instance, we're going to have an opportunity to have two facades preserved and I'm going to say, and I know the architects don't like this, a reasonable facsimile which defers to the other two facades, which in every image that I've seen, and more can be done, I think, at the site plan level, that will make that streetscape look almost as authentic as it had in the past. Notwithstanding the fact that a brand new building is going to be happening in behind. And when I look at some of the iconic places where they preserve heritage in a very, very big way, Rome and Amsterdam, some of the big cities in the world, you walk through a ancient old gateway into a brand new building. No existing structure behind that. The facade is what used to be there, and everything else behind that is brand spanking new. Often it's a mall. In this particular instance, we're dealing with something that has the same scope and scale of what used to be there or what is there now. And I think that it leads to not only this development being very positive improvement to what's there now, but also future developments that we can do, hopefully through a positive relationship with this developer that has done, in fact, a lot of good work, actually got a lot of good heritage work in our community. So I understand the passion of the heritage organizers and folks. I really appreciate that. I think we would all have the same view, but as council, we're left with having to work with developers that own property that want to do something with them. In this case, I think in the long run, a positive development that I think will lead to a streetscape that we can be more proud of when it's done than the way it looks today. And so, when the Pan Am was on, I asked this developer to make that property look better than it did. It was just a bunch of plywood, and they graciously came forward and did some painting and put some images on there that made it look a bit more presentable. I think that was laudable, and I would hope that when they get to the point of redeveloping this site, they can think of and do what many European cities do, because it's our downtown, to put a shroud in front of that has a representation of buildings while the development and construction is happening. That is a very common practice in Europe, and I think it's a smart and doable practice in Hamilton and in Canada that I hope, because this is downtown and because it's so important, because it's the iconic place in our city, that kind of a shroud will help make the city, that part of the city look presentable while the construction is going on. That is going to be necessary whether we like it or not, one way or the other. So I'm going to be supporting Councillor Farr. I think he's done an enormous amount of heavy lifting here, and obviously with competing interests, and that's often the case. But at the end of the day, we have to make a decision, I think, in the long-term interest of our community and in our downtown. And I think this reasonable, workable compromise, I think is a step forward. So compliments to all that have participated, and we would never dismiss the passion of our folks in the community that have passion for heritage. I think that needs to continue. There are many areas that have still lots of heritage properties on them, and the list is growing, and I think that's a positive thing. And we will continue to partner with anyone that wants to continue to preserve that heritage going into the future. But in this particular instance, I think we've come up with something that I think people at the end of the day will appreciate as a reasonable step forward that allows us to get to a development that then would allow us to get to an additional development down the road that I think is going to be of great benefit, not only for our downtown, but for our entire city. So my full compliments to Councillor Farr for all the great work, our great staff, all of those for and against, and I will be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pearson, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and certainly great comments all around the table, both for and against. But I will be supporting this, and in the next application, I too want to compliment Councillor Farr. I think he's done a tremendous job, as I mentioned at the meeting. If we could tell the color of his hair, it's probably a lot grayer than it was 5 years from now. He's done a tremendous amount of work, and I certainly, I don't know that any one of us would do as well as he has in the downtown core of preserving as much as he has and making sure that what's going on is complementary. So there's been a lot here. Certainly, kudos to the Friends of the Gore, to all the citizens that have passion and heritage. You and I, Madam Deputy Mayor, sit on the Heritage Committee along with Councillor Aidan Johnson, and we all know that the committee is very passionate in working with heritage issues. There's over 1,000 properties in the downtown, almost 1,000 properties, that are being looked at to be in a designation. There's over 7,500 properties on a list citywide. So we do have a passion, we do have an interest in this community of preserving heritage. But unfortunately, you can't save all of them. And we have a very, very responsible business owner that's trying to do something. We could have lost all these properties, and they were caught. And it was great that the Christmas miracle, as it was called, came forward, and that was due to Councillor Farr, of at least being able to take a step back and have a sober second thought by everybody to see the importance of this and do the best they can. So it is a compromise. But I've always said you'd rather have a compromise than lose everything. And I'm proud to sit here and move this forward. And just for council and the public's information, Councillor Farr got out of one frying pan, but he's going to be into another one right away. So he does it well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. So, Councillor Farr, you'd like to move item number 4?
Yes, and I alluded to specific to 4B is where we tweaked what the Heritage Committee voted against by a vote of 5-4, as you know.
Yes.
So we're asking for the redevelopment of 2428. That's the demolition. And C, in what's before us today, the Heritage Committee, our Planning Committee, of course, and hopefully here tonight, fully agreed on the 18, 20, and 22, the 3 addresses of preserved and designated facades. So of the 5 addresses, 3 preserved designated facades, and then tonight where this is item 4, our Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee report, Planning Committee did not agree in a vote of 6-3 on B. So everything else is fine, and I would love to move item 4 here tonight. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Farr. And your seconder, please. Seconded by Mr. Mayor. All in favor?
Sorry.
That is carried. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. And those opposed?
And sorry, Madam Deputy Mayor, if I may, a procedural question. Can we not vote? I want to be recorded as opposed to B.
Yes, absolutely. So how about if I go through them individually?
Is that the best? Whatever's
Because
best.
we've got A, B, and C, right? So you're opposed to C?
I'm opposed to B.
Okay. And anyone else opposed? Councillor Green, Councillor Brenda Johnson, Councillor Aidan Johnson, and it's all for the same one? Okay. Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, that carries. Okay, thank you. Moving on to